Okay guys, today we're mainly focusing on the AC wiring for safety. In the future, I want to revisit the sound. I have some ideas for that. But for today we're going to work on the wiring, and we're going to try to make this a little bit safer to use and a little more versatile in what we can do with it. So I've already added a few of the pieces that we need here. We have a AC line filter, we have a fuse holder. Yes, as you can see, I didn't quite have the perfect size fuse, but it is big enough that it's making contact, so that should be just fine. We have a power distribution block here, and we have a few other pieces that we'll add on as we go along. So I'm getting my instruction here from the Bob Roberts website. He has a ton of great information, and anyone new to the hobby should just read his website, take it as gospel, and start and end right there. If he has the information that you need, it's right, trust me. So we're following his design. Now, when he published his design, of course, he's talking about AC wiring for an operator, for a cabinet that you want to put out on the floor or put in your basement, whatever. We're doing it as a test rig, so of course we have the CGA to VGA board, whereas Bob does not. That would not be needed for a cabinet unless you wanted to run an LCD monitor in it, which we are doing just for testing purposes. Although when we're done this, I do hope that we're able to test CRTs as well, and hopefully by the end of this episode we'll be doing that. So the first thing we have to do here is we have to take our AC cord and we need to attach it to the AC line filter. Previously this was connected directly to our power supply, and sure, that works, but it's really not safe. We didn't have a fuse on it. We didn't have a switch on it. We're talking about live power with no safety precautions all along here. And actually, eventually, since this is kind of going to be used out in the open, I may even try to 3D print some sort of cover for this just to be extra safe, but that'll be down the line. So what we need to do then is, instead of connecting that AC cord directly to the power supply, we have the 3 wires from it, and I've already done some crimping here off camera. There's nothing exciting about crimping, so I'm probably going to do the majority of it off camera. I picked up this nice ratcheting crimping tool, which I highly recommend doing. I've talked about it in previous videos, but those flat ones that have wire strippers and then also crimping all in one tool, they're horrible. I'm talking about those ones that are like $5 at Walmart. They're horrible. Spend the $20, get one of these. You will not regret it. This is so much easier to use, and your crimps come out so much better. I've never been good at crimping, and even I can use this. So when I much prefer soldering, but in a situation like this, that's really not the right application. We want to make everything easily disconnectable for swapping stuff around if we need to, and so the quick disconnects are what we're going to stick with here. I did solder a couple things that I pre-prepared, and I'll talk about that when I get to it. So to begin, the AC cord comes in on this side right here. Okay, so for the AC wire we have white, green, and black wires. The white and green get connected here, green in the center, white here, and then black gets connected through the fuse. So let's go ahead and make those connections real quick, and I also did pre-crimp the extra wire for the black. So very simply, now because we're kind of pressed for space, I'm gonna do the connection like this for the black. Again, I'm kind of trying to space this all as close as possible. Without the VGA board, you would have a little more room to breathe, but this will work just fine. Okay. Now these tabs are actually a little bit loose for these connectors, so if you're doing this and if you have that issue, just go over it a little bit with some small pliers. I'll do that off camera. I just don't have them handy right here, but I'll be doing that to make sure these connections are nice and tight. Or alternatively, you could do a little dab of solder, but then you're not going to be able to remove these too easily. Okay, now the next step for our black side here is a power switch, so we can actually have this plugged in without it firing up right away. So that's another nice safety feature to have. Now again, I already pre-crimped this, and I had that same issue that I just mentioned with the fuse holder, where the tabs on the switch were just a little loose. So I actually did put a little dab of solder on them to hold everything nice and tight, and I shrink wrapped it up so we don't have any exposed leads there. The reason that I wanted to heat shrink it like that is because this is a push-through switch, but we don't have, you know, a thin panel here to mount it in or anything. So this is gonna kind of just be, you know, hanging out, you know, floating above here. Maybe in the future I'll 3D print a little panel to stick it in or something, but for now it's just gonna kind of be hanging out, you know, and I'll just, you know, boot, grab it, flag it, and that'll be that. But the heat shrink there just ensures that when I go to grab it, I don't accidentally grab, you know, a hot AC lead there. So we have this end goes directly to the power distribution, and this end connects to the filter. So let's put this in place. Just like this. And now you see we just kind of have the button hanging out here, and we'll be able to switch it on and off at will. Now you probably guessed that the white continues right on to the power distribution, which we actually have a red wire for. Okay, so okay, so now we have our AC into the power distribution. We have connections here, and depending on, you know, what all we would want to connect to this, we could bridge these connections across. Of course, on a typical arcade machine, if this was a typical setup for an arcade machine, you would be using AC to power the marquee and the monitor. So you would want two connections coming off of here, one connection to each. Now we're not going to be running a marquee, of course, because this is a test setup and there's really no reason to test a marquee. It's just as easy to test in a cabinet. But in reality, it's easiest to just replace marquee lights with LEDs these days. So we'll bridge over each side. That'll give us a power output to the power supply, as well as one to a transformer that we can use to test CRTs, which is, again, one of the main goals of this. So let me go ahead and crimp some wires to bridge these connections, and then we'll move on to connecting the transformer. Okay, I got a couple little jumpers to bridge those connections, and I actually did this sort of stupid, because if I had thought ahead, I could have used these connections I was already making. This is, again, the one from the switch. I could have just doubled up the wire here to jump it across. Would have saved myself a connector and would have looked a little bit neater. But that just goes to show you how easy it is to add these jumpers if you need to. I guess it's not that big of a deal. Just would have been a little bit less wire to deal with and a little neater overall. So let's just get this connected, and I'm actually gonna, just for the sake of having less strain on the wire, I'm gonna skip one row. We can adjust this later if this presents any issues for us, but I don't think it will. So there's our jumper, and add our switch back in. Nice and tight, but if I had to do 3 of these, I don't think it would have fit too well in there. Maybe if I bend one of these up, but I would say probably 2 is the practical limit, but we could always jump off the other side, do whatever we need to do. But I think just having 2 connections is going to be plenty. And we'll do our other side. Just to show that we have our continuity. So we got the black reaching all over here, nothing here. We have the red reaching over here, all 4 of these, and then nothing in the middle here. Okay, so far so good. Now from here, like I said, we're branching off in 2 directions. On one side we're going to the power supply so we can actually get some power out of this thing, and on the other side we are going to a transformer for a CRT. Now I don't want to put the transformer directly on here because it will add a lot of weight, and I don't know, I might. I think we should have room for it. There's really nothing else that needs to go on here. I don't know. It's late as I record this, so I'm going to be going to sleep anyway. I'll think about it until tomorrow night when I come back to this. Then we'll either mount the transformer right here in this space. We have plenty of room for it. I don't know about the weight. I don't know if I want this to be weighed down by that. But then again, it would be nice to have everything in one piece. So I'll think about it. We'll either put it here or we'll put it on a separate piece of wood that we can just connect only when we need it. And then we'll also run to the power supply. And that should do it for this. After that, we'll quickly head down to my basement and we'll try to test out a monitor. I have a couple monitors down there that are supposed to work, but I honestly have no idea if they do. They both came out of machines, so maybe we could test them and see what we actually got. And yeah, it should make for an interesting end to the episode. So I'm done rambling. I'm going to bed, and I will see you guys back here right now. Alright guys, I'm back, and I thought about this transformer thing for a while, and I decided I am going to go with a separate piece of wood to mount it. It's quite heavy, and this way I don't have to have it always attached to my setup. I'm not going to be using it too often, and when I do, I'm going to be using it with purpose, so I'm okay with having this separate from the main setup, and then storing it away and pulling it out when I do need it. So in order to keep it separate, you see I have a secondary scrap piece of wood. The transformer itself already mounted to the wood, and I just made this connector right here, no big deal. This end will connect to our power distribution, and under normal circumstances, that's the entire length of it. It's just going to be disconnected, and we'll just have this short pigtail hanging off, so no big deal there. And then the transformer itself gets the longer end of the cable, and I just crimped all this stuff off camera because I've crimped plenty of stuff in other videos. If you want to see how it's done, just check out my older videos. So again, we're following the Bob Roberts explanation, and so this connection goes to the bottom of the transformer. The connections on the top of the transformer go directly to the monitor. Now, we haven't been talking about ground connections too much yet, but we do need ground connections, so for this, and you can see even this transformer even has some rust on it, but that's okay. We have the green ground wire connected directly to the metal of the transformer. I have a quick disconnect on the end, so I can just attach this to the ground chain on our main setup. And let me show you that real quick right now. Okay, before I show the ground chain here, I just want to go over a few things I just did off camera. I was kind of getting a little frustrated by the amount of wiring, and everything was just kind of all over the place, and so I took a little while, about a half hour to an hour, and I just cleaned up the wiring a lot. As you can see, I did move these components on the board a little bit. I wasn't happy with the amount of wiring that was running underneath this board, so I wanted to eliminate that. It's just the speaker wiring going underneath now, and as you can see, I can now disconnect the speaker wiring for neatness if I want to minimize the amount of stuff that's connected here. This will also come in handy in the future because I do plan to add some options for different sound here. I've mentioned that in the past video, but this tiny speaker here, literally just for testing that the board, can output sound. This is not something that you're actually going to use. So in the future we'll talk about sound, but for now let's just get this done, and we'll go hopefully be able to test out a monitor. Another thing that I did here was I basically took my JAMA harness and I cut off every unnecessary wire. I left a little bit just in case I ever want to repurpose this into an actual machine or something. I'll have a little bit of wire there to work off of, just for simplicity's sake. I bundled all the like stuff together so that it's kind of just easier to keep track of everything. It's much neater. As you can see, there's just a few bundles going to this board now, and I also cleaned up the wiring going to the power supply. A lot of these did not have terminals before, so I just added those. They were literally just wrapped around a couple of them. So I also shortened a lot of these wires to where there was a lot of slack that was, again, just causing stuff to get tangled. I added a little wire holder here. Just want to try to keep everything as neat as possible and as short as possible, so it's going to be a lot easier to work with. So let's go over that ground chain that I talked about. So going back to the power cord, which again is this here. Of course, the green wire is the ground, and that's the ground that comes in for everything. That's our earth ground that hooks up to our wiring in the house and literally goes to an earth ground. So when you connect this lug here, you're actually connecting to the metal casing of this filter. So from there, all of the bare metal becomes a ground connection. So you see we have a ground here, we have a ground here. Now this one is the one that will go off to the monitor transformer when we're testing a monitor. Otherwise, this can just, hang off. It doesn't matter if it's disconnected. This one, if we follow that, is the one that goes over to the power supply, and that goes into the FG terminal, which is field ground. And that's pretty much all we need for this, because again, we're not doing marquee lighting or anything like that on here. This board is all DC, so there's no earth ground or anything. It just gets the ground from output from the power supply, and that's about it as far as the grounds go. So again, when we want to connect those monitors, we're simply going to connect our black and white power here and the green ground, and then we can test monitors with this. So that is pretty much it for the AC wiring, and the DC wiring is all done too. Okay, before we go take this down to test out a monitor, we do need to do one more thing, and what it is this video connector is what typically comes with newer JAMA harnesses that you're going to be buying in this day and age, 2019. And actually, from my understanding, for quite some time, this is what they've been including. This fits directly onto the CGA to VGA board, and I assume that's just because they assume, if you're putting together an arcade machine these days, you're probably going to be hooking it up to a VGA board. So I guess that's specifically why you get this connector. But as you may have guessed, this connector does not work with original arcade monitors. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut it off right here, and I'm just going to make an adapter for the original monitors, And then that way we'll be able to go back and forth depending on whether we want to use a VGA display or an arcade monitor. I'm just going to make that adapter real quick, and then we'll take it downstairs and we'll test it out with the monitor. Okay guys, I got the video adapters built, and I got set up to test this 19-inch monitor that I picked up really cheap about a year ago. I've never tested this at all, so I had no idea if it was going to power up or not, but I wanted to see if I could observe any signs of life at all, just to see that this test circuit was working properly. So with everything connected and using a cheap multi-board to test with, I powered it on. Not only did the monitor not power up, but my DC power supply went up in smoke. I took another look at the circuit, and that's when I noticed that I had wired it for -5 volts. I don't think that's why the power supply blew, but it was still good that I caught it. After inspecting the circuit, I didn't see anything wrong. There were no warm or melted wires, and neither the circuit fuse nor the one in the power supply had blown. Maybe it was just bad luck, and that power supply was about to die regardless. I grabbed another power supply that I had in storage and wired it back up. I went back to test the monitor again. Again, I got no light from the monitor, but this time the power supply was fine. I again inspected the circuit, and after changing nothing except switching the positions of the AC wiring on the transformer, I got power to the monitor and PCB. I'm no electrician, but my understanding is that AC voltage doesn't have polarity, so I don't think this should have changed anything, but it did. Anyway, turns out my circuit works great for testing CRT monitors, so this will be a great new tool in my inventory as I work through the projects I've accumulated. Not only did the circuit work great, but I also found out that the monitor has a nice bright, sharp picture. Having it work at all was a win, but I don't even think it needs a cap kit, so that's even better. That's all for today's video. I know these have been far and few between, but I'm going to be trying my best to hunker down and get some of these projects knocked out as the weather gets colder. So hopefully I'll be able to post videos at a faster clip going forward. I do have a few console game projects that I want to do, and those will probably be next because I should be able to knock them out fairly quickly. After that, we'll hit the ground running on those arcade projects. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.